In May of 2019, I was driving through the Four Corners area, that spot in the southwest where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah all touch. I was headed towards Shiprock, New Mexico on Route 491, a stretch of road some locals still refer to by its former name, Route 666. I had no clue at the time about the folklore attached to it. I just knew I had an early morning meeting in Durango and decided to push a little farther that evening before stopping for the night. The sun had just dipped behind the mesas, turning the sky a deep orange that bled into black. The road ahead stretched endlessly through open desert with nothing but scrub and distant rock formations lining the horizon. My car was nearly the only one on the highway, and I was feeling that strange kind of road fatigue where your thoughts start to wander and reality bends slightly around the edges. That's when I saw her. A woman standing on the side of the road. She wore a long black dress that looked heavy and out of place in the desert heat. Her hair was loose, falling over her face, and she had her back turned to me, standing still as a statue. No motion, no signals for help, no bag or vehicle nearby, just stillness. I slowed down instinctively. I even started pulling over, assuming she might need help, but as my headlights caught the angle of her face, I saw something that stopped me cold. Her skin was a sickly grey. Her eyes were open, but lifeless, completely glazed, and most disturbingly, her mouth was impossibly wide, like it had been stretched into a permanent scream. But there was no sound. I hit the gas and didn't look back. A few miles later, I saw another figure ahead, same black dress, same hair, same stance, but I had just left her behind. I swerved around her without slowing down and tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe a trick of the desert light or a prank, someone setting up mannequins to scare travelers. But I couldn't shake the cold that had settled in my chest. A little further up the road, I passed a faded green sign for a turn-off called White Rock Crossing. I don't even remember deciding to exit. I just felt a pull, like something wanted me to. The side road led to a gravel loop that encircled a small boarded-up building. Looked like it used to be a rest stop or maybe an old diner. I parked and stepped out to stretch, telling myself I just needed a moment. But immediately I regretted it. The wind was gone, the desert was quiet, too quiet, and then I heard crying, not from the building, from behind me. I turned, and there she was, the same woman, standing on the edge of the lot, no more than 15 feet away, except this time she was looking at me. I couldn't move. My legs were locked. Her eyes were wet now, but not with tears. They were bleeding, slowly, thick, dark tears running down her face, staining the front of her dress. I finally broke from the trance and ran back to my car. I slammed the door, locked it, and looked up, but she was gone, completely vanished. When I pulled back onto the highway and regained cell signal, I called a local friend I'd planned to visit in Durango. I told him everything. He didn't even let me finish. He just said, "You saw the widow." I had no idea what he meant. He explained that there's a legend among the Navajo and Ute tribes about a woman who lost her husband in a car crash on that stretch of highway decades ago. They say she wanders the road searching for him, unable to rest. If you stop for her, or worse, follow her, she marks you. I asked what that meant, and he said, "You'll know." That night in my hotel room, the power went out around 3:30 a.m. I lit the flashlight on my phone and pointed it toward the door. There, hanging from the inside handle, was a strip of black fabric. I hadn't brought anything like that with me. I left the next morning without unpacking, and for weeks afterward, wherever I went, I'd catch the faint scent of dried roses, like the kind you'd find at an old funeral home. In crowded rooms, I'd see women with long dark hair and freeze. Not because it was her, but because I was scared it wouldn't be. Even now I refuse to drive Route 491 after dark. Some nights I still wake up to that scent lingering in my hallway. I never saw her face again, but I still check my door every night, just in case. In late September of 2020, I took a solo camping trip deep into the Olympic National Forest in Washington. The plan was to disconnect from everything. No phone, no emails, no people. Just me, a tent, my notebook, and the silence of the woods. I found a remote spot about 10 miles from the nearest trailhead, not even marked on most maps, surrounded by towering pine trees that seemed to swallow sound. The ranger at the station gave me a weird look when I told him where I was heading. He didn't say anything discouraging, just nodded slowly and told me to keep my fire small and my ears open. I assumed he meant bears or coyotes, maybe even wolves. I didn't realize until later what he was really warning me about. The first night was peaceful, cold, quiet, and still. I read by flashlight for a while before falling asleep to the sound of wind brushing through the trees. No strange sounds, no movement. But at exactly 2:46 a.m. I woke up. No sound woke me, no dreams. Just that sudden, unnatural alertness where your body knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. I sat up in my sleeping bag and listened. At first, all I heard was the rustling of pine needles. But then it changed. The wind died, replaced by a faint whistle. Not bird song, not human, just a slow, tuneless whistle. Low and shaky. It came from somewhere deep in the forest, too far to be close, but loud enough to be unnatural. It didn't follow a melody and it didn't stop. Just kept going, drifting between trees like smoke. I didn't sleep after that. By morning, the forest looked the same. Birds were chirping, the sky was clear, and I started to convince myself it had been the wind. But that night it happened again. This time at 2:43 a.m. The whistle was closer, still slow, still tuneless, but I could tell it had moved. Not straight toward me, but around me, like it was circling. I sat up, heart pounding, and grabbed the flashlight. I didn't go outside the tent. I didn't want to know, but I kept the light trained on the zipper just in case. When dawn came, I packed up and decided to hike farther away from that spot, deeper into the forest where I thought maybe I could escape whatever it was. I hiked until mid-afternoon and set up camp near a creek, convinced the sound wouldn't follow. That night I kept a fire going and stayed awake long after midnight, trying to fight sleep. But again, 2:41 a.m. this time, I heard it, the same whistle, now coming from upstream, closer. I grabbed a rock and moved behind a tree, trying to convince myself it was some kind of prank. A hiker, maybe, someone messing around. But the moment I stopped moving, it stopped too. Total silence. I held my breath and waited, and then it whistled again, from behind me. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing, no eyes, no figure, just trees and darkness. I didn't sleep again. By the fourth night I was wrecked. My nerves were shot, my legs were sore, and my mind felt like it was unspooling at the edges. I told myself I would hike back to the car at dawn, but that final night is what made me never go back. At 2:39 a.m. I woke up to the sound of something brushing against my tent. Not walking, dragging. I sat up instantly, too scared to move, and then the whistling began again. But this time it came from all around me, like multiple sources. Left, right, far off, right outside. I unzipped the tent just an inch, enough to peek through. What I saw didn't make sense. There were pine trees in a perfect ring around my camp where there had been none the night before, all identical in size, all surrounding me in a near-perfect circle, and standing between two of them, half hidden in shadow, was a tall, thin figure. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, tilted slightly to one side, lips puckered in a frozen whistle. I didn't move until daylight. When the sun finally rose, there were no footprints, no circle, no figure. But every pine needle on the forest floor around my tent was turned upside down, silver side up, like they had all been brushed by something circling me. I hiked out that day without stopping once. When I returned to the ranger station, the same guy was there. I told him I heard something, someone whistling. He didn't laugh. He just said, "You stayed 4 nights out there? You're lucky." I asked him what it was, and he paused before answering. "Old story," he said, "about a spirit that whistles to lure people into the woods. They say the farther away it sounds, the closer it is. When it sounds like it's right next to you, you're already gone. I don't know what I heard, but I haven't camped alone since." In October of 2018, I visited my cousin in Kentucky for a small family gathering. He lived just outside a little town called Irvine, nestled deep in the Appalachians. The entire area had this timeless, isolated feel, rolling hills, dense woods, and winding gravel roads that seemed to vanish into the trees. My cousin owned a 100-year-old cabin at the edge of a forest locals called Boone Hollow. I'd never heard of it before, but when I mentioned wanting to hike through it alone the next day, he got real quiet and told me to be careful. I laughed it off, but before heading to bed, he stopped me and said, "If you hear crying in the woods at night, don't open your window, and for God's sake, don't speak to it." I thought he was messing with me, some old mountain folklore to spook the city guy. But I remembered the way he said it, low, serious, like it came from experience. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was the creaking of the old house. Around 1 a.m., I cracked open the window a few inches just to get some cool air in the room. The woods behind the cabin were pitch black, not even the moon breaking through the clouds. At first it was peaceful, the kind of quiet you only get when you're truly far from civilization. Then I heard it, a soft, distant sobbing. At first I thought it was a fox or maybe an owl, something with a strange call, but the longer I listened, the clearer it became. It was definitely a woman, crying, low and mournful, not like someone in pain, but someone grieving. I leaned toward the window, trying to make out where it was coming from. It echoed between the trees, making it impossible to pinpoint. And then it stopped. For several seconds there was only silence, until I heard a single word whispered so softly it sounded like it was carried on the wind. Please, it came from right beneath the window. I froze. There was no mistaking it. That voice had moved fast, from deep in the woods to directly under my room in a matter of seconds. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was just the wind, a dream, anything but what it seemed. I shut the window quickly, latched it, and backed away. The crying started again, now louder, closer. I pressed my ear to the wall, barely breathing. She was outside the cabin, pacing, crying, pleading. Every few minutes she'd stop and whisper something, sometimes just a word, sometimes a sentence I couldn't quite catch. It was like she was talking to someone who wasn't answering her. The worst part was how normal it sounded. Not ghostly, not distorted, just a woman sobbing in the dark. I didn't sleep at all that night. By morning the woods were silent again. When I told my cousin what I'd heard, he just nodded slowly, then asked if I'd spoken to her. I said no. He looked relieved and told me the story behind it. Back in the 1800s, a woman named Margaret Grayson lived in that hollow. Her husband was a logger who died in an accident, some say crushed by a falling tree, others say something darker. She was never the same after that. Started wandering the woods, calling his name, crying, begging for him to return. One day she vanished, just walked into the trees and never came out. Her body was never found. Since then, people have claimed to hear her at night, always crying, always near, and always getting closer if you acknowledge her. She's looking for someone to answer, my cousin said, and once you do, she knows who you are. I tried to shake it off as folklore, an eerie coincidence. But the next night I heard her again, sometime after 2 a.m., softer this time, as if she was further away. But the moment I closed my eyes, I felt something brush against the side of the house. Not an animal, it was a hand dragging slowly along the siding, up to the window, then silence. I didn't dare move. Then came the knock, 3 slow taps on the glass. I opened my eyes, heart pounding, and stared at the window from across the room. She was there, a face, pale, eyes swollen and red. Tears streaked across her cheeks, hair matted to her head, and a smile so slight I almost missed it. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me, and lips trembling like she wanted to say something. I stayed frozen, not even blinking. And then just like that, she was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just the emptiness of the woods. I left the next morning, cut the trip short, never said why. But for the next few nights, even back at home, I kept hearing faint knocks, not on the front door, not on the walls, on the window, and always at the same time. Now, every time I travel, I check the windows wherever I stay. I listen for crying when the wind dies down, and I never, ever open the glass, because I think she found me that night, and I think she's still waiting for me to answer. Some stories cross borders, echo through generations, and refuse to die. If these true folklore horrors gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because the next tale might come from somewhere closer than you think.